We have apologies, Madam Mayor, from Councillors Hutton and Moody.
Thank you. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. To either receive disclosures of unregistered or other interests from councillors on matters to be considered at the meeting. So if you've got an interest, to declare it now, please, or as soon as you become aware of it during the course of the meeting. Councillor Mrs Ewing.
Toilets, if we get to West Devon, and toilets.
Thank you. We now move on to item 3, minutes of the council meeting, to confirm the minutes of the meeting of Tavistock Town Council, which was held on Tuesday the 14th of January 2020, which are enclosed in your papers. And the town clock's forgotten to bring in by the look of it. So we'll start with, first of all, accuracy, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So are they a true record of the meeting that was held here on the 14th of January, please? Thank you. With a seconder, please. Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4, public representations and questions. Do we have any, please, Mr Town Clerk?
None, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We move on now to item 5, items requiring a decision. We're going to take little a, b and c first, and then we'll look at the toilet position with the supplementary report that we received. So these are little a, little b, little c, are all recommendations consistent with decisions previously made in the last round of meetings. So if I can propose little a, the Tavistock Town Council budget 2020-2021, minute 299 refers, appendix A1, B, the Tavistock Town Council preset 2020-2021 in the sum of 728,255 or 166.24 per bandy equivalent property, brackets minute number 299 refers, and C, and receive the rolling capital programme, appendix 2. Thank you. Councillor Parker.
I appreciate the going to take the toilets as a second bite at this, but it occurs to me that there is an item in the papers, the main budget papers, a line that reads for revenue expenditure £35,000 for public toilets. Given that the decisions that we might make on the second issue, in the second debate, is it possible to hold that £35,000 as a provisional item at this stage? Our decision may change that.
Well, I don't think there's. I mean, looking at the toilet position, there's no new money required under the supplementary paper that we've got. So, did you want to make a proposal to do that?
Yes, please, if I may.
Right. Councillor Mrs Mann, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I also am concerned that the budget has been increased in that line item for toilet provision, but that is also what is going to be discussed in the other document. So I don't know how we could approve the budget if we don't know whether or not we're going to approve toilet provision in that way.
Okay, thank you. Town Clerk, please.
I think just really by way of point of clarification, the budget which is set aside for toilets is decreased in line with the council's decision at the last meeting. So what we've actually done is we have taken out the provision which was anticipated to be made in relation to the Bedford car park public conveniences. So what you've got is consistent with the delivery of the Guildhall as agreed at your last meeting, and not including the Bedford.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, but since the options in the supplementary report, only one of those is the delivery of the Guildhall as per the previous decision. It seems to me that if we take this decision now for 35,000 as part of the budget, then that renders the discussion on the supplementary reports irrelevant.
Yeah, but there's no new money in the supplementary report. It's still going to be the same amount of money. There just might be another option which might be available.
I take that point, but that money, we're told that that money could be spent in two ways. One, for Guildhall, which is what we decided previously and what is being recommended to us now. The second option is as part contribution to some kind of wider scheme that is as yet undisclosed to us, that has not had a business case made, and is not for the purpose that we've approved the £35,000 so far. And it seems to me just too early to be saying that we nail on £35,000 in the budget. It may be that the second option only requires 20,000, maybe it requires 60,000. If we nail on 35,000, then we're rendering that second discussion, I think, irrelevant.
But sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I just think, just from the point of view of the what the report's intended to achieve, and it may or may not achieve that, it's certainly not saying that the whole of the budget head that is set aside for the Guildhall car park public conveniences could or should be utilised in relation to an alternative option, and certainly not saying that it should be relied upon by the Borough Council if an alternative option is a runner. That is a decision which members would need to make, as Councillor Parker quite rightly points out, at the moment in time when they understand the nature of the arrangement the Borough Council has arranged, if it can arrange it, what the costs and the income associated with that are and what the implications are. Unfortunately, the challenge that we have is we need to set a precept. The Borough Council's deadline for the precept was the 31st of January. We're the only council in the borough not to have actually yet set a precept. And effectively what that is doing is saying, if they come forward and say that they have a solution, you would need to consider on its merits that solution at that time and what you felt was or wasn't appropriate to contribute to it. If they are unable to negotiate a solution, then we revert to the original position, which is to say we are willing and prepared to take on the Guildhall car park public conveniences, but necessarily subject to the caveats and the timeline set out in paragraph 3.3, because, as you will appreciate, the issue about how long it takes us to mobilise, the issue about putting contracts in place, the issue about transfer of freehold, those are not things that can necessarily be done as rapidly as the 1st of April unless we have a lead-in time associated with actually delivering it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see who went first. Yeah, there's a... Councillor Parker's raised an amendment.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the Town Clerk's answer, I think, makes my point that we can't discuss the 35,000 without, or nail on the 35,000 without knowing what the alternative is. And since West Devon Borough Council haven't put that alternative forward, we're very much either left in the dark or giving them a blank cheque for £35,000. My amendment was to the effect that the £35,000 identified in the revenue expenditure line be approved provisionally pending scrutiny of a business case from West Edinburgh Council by the Public Conveniences Subcommittee and that subcommittee's advice to Council, which means we can set a precept with that line of £35,000 in it, but that we put the marker down that we need advice from those that we've appointed to scrutinise the future arrangements for public toilets in Tavistock.
Whether he's... Sorry, can I just...
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. For the purposes of setting the precept, because obviously we need to serve notice upon the Borough Council, when you say provisionally approved, are you saying that the precept that we issue should be inclusive of the £35,000, or exclusive of it? And the reason I ask that question is because realistically the Borough Council aren't going to be in a position, even, I don't think their meeting is even taking place for another week or more. So the precept will need to be submitted, either including the £35,000 or excluding it, for the purposes of the demand upon the borough. I appreciate that politically you may wish to hypothecate the money differently and say this effectively is a floating sum, but either we have the money at the time we set the precept or we don't. And I just need to know which figure the amendment relates to, if I may, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I appreciate the contradiction that I might have set up in that amendment. Yes, it was my intention that that money be included. It seems to me, in view of the Town Clerk's answer, that the safest way is to specify that that money has been and is allocated specifically for the Guildhall car park. If then a business case comes along that says it's a different way of doing it, I will take a decision at that time. So it may be that my amendment is better phrased in response to the Town Clerk, that the allocation of £35,000 revenue and expenditure for public toilets is specifically allocated to the Guildhall car park toilets.
Thank you.
And that way there's no question.
Right, I've got Councillor Mrs Mann and Councillor Mrs Parker. I'm not sure quite who was first. Councillor Mrs Mann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'd like to ask a few questions because I'm still confused. What we're essentially going to be doing then is taxing the public for the potential services of a toilet over which we have no control?
No. No.
Because if, for instance, I mean, hypothetically, West Devon could find out that they couldn't provide the service and they close it, West Devon could still say, we're not going to hand the toilets over to you. I find it strange that after a year and a half and the fact that they took a decision to close the toilets, that we are now being forced to decide whether or not to retain a budget and actually tax people in Tavistock more over something that we have no control over. So do we have control over that money then for toilets at some point in the future? And I'm worried about the amendment for the same reason, Councillor Parker, I'd ask you to clarify. For instance, what if they say, no, you can't have the Guildhall toilets. Now we've had a £35,000 budget that is supposed to be for public conveniences that we've tied to Guildhall toilets that we have no control over.
Since that seemed to be me, Madam Mayor, I think the answer to that is that the allocation of £35,000 in revenue expenditure in this year's budget would be completely consistent both with the decisions that we took at the last council meeting, all of the considerations of the public conveniences subcommittee and of the budget and policy committee. Up to now, all of those committees and the council have accepted that the Guildhall car park toilets are likely to cost us up to £35,000. And when we're budget setting, I think that's the best we can do, provided we make it clear to the world that that's what that money is currently allocated for.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Parker, did you wish to speak?
Mine was a slightly more general comment, but related specifically to that, in that throughout this report, it refers to so as to be cost neutral to West Devon. And that has been repeated 3 times in the report. And I just wondered why we were so concerned about being cost neutral to West Devon when it's our own finances we need to be concerned about, and all the people here are concerned about, and the efforts to make up an element of an evidenced and affordable shortfall that WD might incur so as to be cost neutral to WD by way of a standing grant for the continued future delivery by WD of the 3 sets of public conveniences in the town, which goes against nearly all of the things we discussed at the last council meeting.
Toby, you're going to speak to that?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful if I sort of run through the background to this, and please bear in mind this is an officer report, and members make decisions which will not necessarily always be consistent with the recommendations of your officers. As you know, we entered into discussions with West Devon Borough Council last year. We were treated very favourably by West Devon in the sense that we are the only, I was going to say town, but we're the only community within the borough which actually had toilets operated at West Devon Borough Council's cost for the past 12 months. As far as I'm aware, all other public conveniences passed over at the end of the previous financial year.
No,
Councillor Mann indicates that there are some others which haven't.
Princetown and Brentor, I don't think.
So there are some others, but the majority certainly have transferred over, or the decision was made in relation to last year. Now, we in good faith, and the Borough Council in good faith, were anticipating that we would take on, in principle, 2 sets of public conveniences following the meeting of this council in March last year. As a result of our due diligence and the work that's been done on your behalf and the negotiations that have taken place with West Devon Borough Council, in January, as you know, this year, we decided that we were in a position to take over the Guildhall public conveniences. We were looking at other options, but we weren't at that time in a position to take over the Bedford car park public conveniences. We advised the Borough Council that that was the position. That clearly, from their point of view, was a change of circumstances. We received correspondence from them saying that they needed time to think about this. We pressed back on the point that time really wasn't on our side in relation to both the April closure date and in relation to the setting of the precept and the clarity that we needed in and around that. As far as I am aware, the Borough Council have identified one potential option which has the capacity, if it comes through, to keep the 3 sets of public conveniences open. The reason the report is framed as it is to protect and to preserve the position that you have already established in relation to the Guildhall car park public conveniences, but from an officer perspective, and I hasten to add, without prejudice to any decision that you might make, and West Devon are well aware of that. What I said to West Devon, and it came from me, not from West Devon, was if you are looking at a cost-neutral position, because effectively that is your policy position, that is my understanding of their position. In other words, they intend to spend no money on public conveniences anywhere in the borough going forwards. If that is the policy position that they have, and they have the potential to engage a commercial operator who can deliver the public conveniences at 0 cost to West Devon, well, we don't have to make a contribution and the community is a winner because there are 3 sets of public conveniences that are open. If, however, there were to be a shortfall which was capable of being evidenced, as Councillor Park has made on the basis of a business plan and the contractual arrangements that were put in place, and that shortfall was appreciably less than it would take us to operate 1 set of public conveniences, clearly the Council then has 2 options. Option 1 is to say to the Borough Council, well, either you do that against your policy decision and you incur a loss, in which case we don't operate the Guildhall public conveniences. Option 2 is to say, OK, in that situation there is a shortfall, we could consider making a grant in order to keep 3 sets of public conveniences open, because we know, on the status quo, if we take over the Guildhall public conveniences, that leaves the Bedford car park public conveniences at risk. So it's a question as to whether or not, when we have the evidence, we actually go with route 1, which is keeping 3 open, or route 2, which is keeping the 1 open we can and making a contribution towards the bus station toilets, as previously indicated. So this is a report which I've prepared, so I apologise if it's not clear. I also apologise if you disagree with the content. What it seeks to try and do is to provide you with the best options and the only available options that we are currently aware of in relation to the provision of public conveniences within the town. My personal view, and I stand to be corrected, and I very much hope that I am corrected, is that I think it will be hard, unless you add other concessions or benefits to the existing public conveniences, to get a private operator to be able to run them and run them at a commercial profit. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, obviously the borough has assets surrounding those which we wouldn't have had, so it may well be the case that they can provide something which we otherwise can't. But there is no commitment in here to say we will pay that. What it's saying is there is an option, and when the time comes, we either need to know that we will be taking on the Guildhall car park public conveniences in accordance with paragraph 3.3 and to that timeline, otherwise we cannot mobilise, or we are prepared to consider supporting, subject to an evidence base in relation to the keeping open of all the public conveniences. And that was really all the report set out to achieve, because ultimately, and I think picking up on Councillor Mrs Mann's point, we do need to recognise that these public conveniences are not currently the property of or in the ownership of or under the control of the town council. We are necessarily working with a partner here, and we're seeking to provide, however we do it and whatever that represents, best outcome for our community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think we've strayed onto the supplementary report. So
Yeah, we have.
Before we leave the main report, I also have questions on the Guildhall entries in the budget. I think I sent those questions to the town clerk at the end of last week. It's a simple question. I understand that the town council's commitment, revenue commitment, is to underwrite the costs of the Guildhall and the THT for up to 3 years. The report that backs up the precept from policy and budget contains a business case from the THT, which says that there's an agreement between HLF and Tavistock Town Council that we will underwrite the operating costs, including those of THT, for the full term of 20 years. Have I misunderstood something?
Town clerk, please.
Not quite. Sorry, to clarify the situation, the position is that we have agreed that we will underwrite the operating costs, the necessary operating costs and the identified other costs, and those are two defined categories, as defined in the service level agreement and the lease, and we will underwrite those without a threshold for the first 3 years of operation of Tavistock Heritage Trust. But those are identified costs, so we're not underwriting all costs, it is those which are identified within that, and those have to be agreed with ourselves. But there is not a limit in relation to that. After the 3-year period, the agreement sets, which is part of what was submitted to Heritage Lottery Fund, then sets a threshold beyond which, if it costs us more than, my recollection is, but please don't totally hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, it's £35,000 per annum. If it costs more than £35,000 per annum, there is then a break clause within the service level agreement and the lease, which affords the council the opportunity to say, because it is costing us above that, that we can actually terminate the arrangement with THT. That does not alleviate the town council of the obligations under the Heritage Lottery Fund agreement in terms of delivering the approved purposes. So in the event that were to happen, we would as officers be coming back and saying, well, this is the extent of the overspend, these are the alternatives that could be put in place in order to deliver the approved purposes and the anticipated costs associated with those. And these are the implications, and you'd be having a conversation with THT about whether or not we could find a way through. So the answer is no limit on the underwriting for years 1 to 3. Thereafter, a £35,000 limit, subject to the review process which is set out in the service level agreement and lease, which we've just begun with yourself, Councillor Smith and Councillor Ward, to discuss with THT.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've had an amendment which didn't. Do we have a seconder to Councillor Parker's amendment? Councillor Mrs Parker. So, Councillor Mrs Mann.
I'm sorry, could you explain what the amendment is again? I've lost the thread here again.
The amendment, as I changed it after discussion with the answer from the Town Clerk, is simply to note that the allocation of 35,000 of revenue expenditure for public toilets is specifically for the maintenance of the Guildhall toilets. And the purpose of that is to make sure that the allocation is within the budget, but that if in future a different arrangement comes along, then we can hypothecate, we can discuss it, agree that, and go back to that budget line and reallocate it. But if we don't specify that, then in my view is we're simply writing the West Edinburgh Council a blank cheque.
Will we be able to do that under the 6-month rule?
Yes, because they'll do it via report to committee.
Okay, right, okay. Right, so we've got an amendment which has been seconded. Anybody wish to ask any questions, debate that amendment?
May I just clarify?
Please.
Just to clarify for members and for myself. So essentially, we have on the table the proposition which are items A, B and C as set out. The only addition to that is that rather than adopting the recommendation as set out in the report called the Supplementary Budget Precept Report, that recommendation is varied according to what Councillor Parker has set out. So you are setting the budget and the precept, receiving the rolling capital programme, and that one variation of wording in relation to the Supplementary Budget Report. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so we'll take the amendment now. So those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And hang on, I saw a late hand go up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay. Those against?
None against.
Okay.
And if you like to take the substantive motion.
Yes. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Ewing abstained from that one because it included public toilets. Right, now we'll take the substantive motion which has been proposed and seconded. So that's as in little a, b and c.
Together with the adjusted.
Together with the amendment as has just been agreed. So open it up to debate. No. Those in favour, please show.
That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, was there anything else?
I think that's it.
We're not going to talk about the Guildhall cobbles or anything? We're not going to talk about the Guildhall cobbles or anything?
We haven't discussed it last week.
Did you want to speak about anything tonight, as everybody said? Right, okay, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for attending on this cold and wet evening, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you. Parker?
We do have the supplementary report. I mean, the decision we've just taken is on the budget setting and precept. The supplementary report, in my own view, is that we should send a message back to West Edinburgh Council to the effect that we are, if I can suggest a recommendation, that Tavistock Town Council welcomes the opportunity to work with West Edinburgh Council and other partners to achieve the long-term provision of public toilets in the town, and would welcome the provision by WDBC of a detailed business plan to enable scrutiny of the business case by the Public Conveniences Subcommittee, and that subcommittee's advice to full council. Otherwise, we have just taken a decision to allocate the money to the Guildhall toilets, and we haven't responded to the invitation from West Devon. I think that in that sense, the Town Clerk's report is very helpful in setting out the choices that are in front of us, and we should welcome the approach.
Thank you. Town Clerk.
I'm very happy to use words very, very similar to that when I respond on the basis of the resolution that you previously made. So we will certainly do that, because I think it's important that West Devon do understand, and I think we made the point in the previous debate, that if they have a viable option, and it's a big if, but if they do have one, then that is something which we would need to understand the cost base of, the contractual arrangements associated with, in order to give assurance not just to ourselves as a council, but more importantly to the ratepayer, that their money was being spent to good effect for the delivery of services for and on behalf of the community. So we would certainly use words to that effect.
Madam Mayor, if I may just respond, would it help if West Devon Borough Council understood that that is the view of the council as a whole? And it's not, I don't say merely, but it is not an officer's view, it is the view of the council as a whole.
I'm happy to convey it, unless, as I look around colleagues, they have a different view, as being the view of the council.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Hold on.